My name is Larry Marr.
Larry, have you always been from Gallipolis?
I was born in Gallipolis. I lived in the rural area of the Mudsock, Northup area. And yes, other than the time I've been away from the country, I've lived in Gallipolis.
And so you went to the local high schools, you've lived your whole life,
The
you
local
met your wife here?
Local high school, Southwestern High School, out Route 325.
Mm-hmm.
And completed high school there, and then came to Rio Grande College in '61. And I spent 2 years here, transferred my credits to Ohio State, and completed a BS degree in animal science at Ohio State.
So you were a farmer, I take it?
Well, I did some farming on the family farm, and raised sheep, cattle, some crops, put up a lot of hay, and worked for other farmers, earning a little extra money at the same time. And yeah, I spent quite a bit of time on the farm.
Now, eventually you made it to the military service. When did you, were you drafted or were you enlisting in the military?
Well, it was, I enlisted through, you might say, through the ROTC program at Ohio State. At that time, you took a 2-year basic course in ROTC, and I chose Army ROTC. And I stayed with the ROTC throughout about 3 years at Ohio State, and went in as a second lieutenant. In the first, I had the option to go into Signal Corps, and it was to be a regular Army commission. So I chose a reserve commission, and I went into the armor branch. In 1967, February 1967. Spent some time took an armor officer basic course at Fort Knox, equivalent to the enlisted, the drafted person's boot camp. Then later on went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania for the rigorous officer training. I think we spent about 6 weeks up there at the Indiantown Gap. And following my tour there at Fort Knox, I received orders for Fort Bliss, Texas, and Air Defense Command, and I went in as a training officer in a basic training unit. So I became interested in teaching as I taught a lot of classes to the basic trainees, and developed an interest in teaching at that time. And then following that, I received orders for Vietnam. Arrived in Vietnam in February of '68, and came into kind of a hostile situation.
The Tet Offensive was...
The Tet Offensive.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, a friend of mine that I had known earlier was with me at the time we were assigned to the 1st Air Cav. And we found out that we were replacement officers in a platoon, let's say a larger, into a company, that the CO had been killed, and 2 of the platoon leaders were injured badly, and they had to be sent to hospitals, and we were replacement officers. And we were very concerned about our safety at that point, but and I spent a little time with that young fella, and then we lost touch. And I know his name, but I been unable to contact him after that time. So we went ahead. We had assignments with the 1st Air Cav, and we were up in I Corps north of Da Nang. We were stationed out of a camp called Camp Evans, and I remember arriving in country there, and all this red clay, defoliated camp, and I knew of Agent Orange, dioxin, the treatment program, but it didn't hit me too much until later when I came into the company and went on my assignment. And we went on these little wagon-like vehicles that you had a seat up here. They called it a mule, and they took us out to the platoon, and I left the platoon. And you have to understand, I first experience in combat. You know, they're shooting live bullets out there, and a little reluctant to thaw out and meet the troops. And I had a Afro-American platoon sergeant, Sergeant Green. I said, "Sergeant," I said, "I've never done this before. This is a new experience. We've had a lot of training." And he says, "Sir," he said, "just stick with me." He says, "I've been here this is my third tour." And he'd seen a lot of combat. And he was a great encouragement of somebody to entrust, you know, my feelings and my lack of combat experience. He says, "I will help you through this." So we had a good tour with our men there. And we were assigned the responsibility of perimeter defense around the Camp Evans. So we'd go out nearly every day with our platoon, and we would do the searching for what hot spots there might be out there. And very, very seldom did we come up on any contact with the Viet Cong. Occasionally we'd hear the rat-a-tat-tat of the AK-47s. We'd get down, and you'd wait a period of time. You'd see no more activity, and you get up and move out again. And that was one of the major assignments I had with the 1st Air Cav. And later on, I was out in the field in search and destroy missions with the Cav. One area that was quite hostile was when we were on an operation in the Ashaw Valley. And some of our men in my platoon were injured. We had good medics, took care of them. And it was always that fear of, you know, what lurked around the corner, the next step. But we were a pretty tight-knit group that got along, communicated well. And again, I had Sergeant Green with me, and he was a good man. Great poker player. He made more money playing poker and sending the money back to his home than he did with his base pay. And
put this line under your arm.
Huh?
Just put this line under.
Okay. You know, through all that experience, I was always a good sleeper, and there was a certain amount of stress all the time, but nothing interrupted me from getting a full night's sleep, even in the tents out there in the field. And kind of amazed, a lot of people says, "Well, sir, don't you think, did you get a good night's sleep?" I said, "Well, sure." I said, "We slept the whole evening," and I saw a lot of fear on the face of a lot of young men over there. Not that, you know, I was a great deal different, but it was quite a time.
Now, have you stayed in touch with Sergeant Green?
Say again?
Have you stayed in touch with Sergeant Green?
No, lost contact with him. And one regret I have is that I didn't get a good photo. I took a lot of slides with my 35 millimeter camera, but I didn't get a picture of my my platoon, Sergeant Green and the other people, with the names under it. I would tell anyone going into service, document who you're with and do some journaling. You definitely need to journal every day or at least once a week of what you did. Most of my journals are in my letters that I've written back to my wife Karen, and I can go back and uncover some of my activities through those letters. And
Now, how was your experiences affecting you personally since the war? Post-traumatic stress disorder, did you have any experiences during the war that come to light frequently after you got back? Or
probably the only thing I can say that that would even relate to a flashback would be some dreams occasionally where I've been forced to go back on active duty in a military situation. But no real, nothing detrimental. I've even been to the VA and just been examined about, in counseling with psychiatrists about my mental condition. And they say, you're still married to the same wife? And that was kind of uncommon. And my daily routine seems to be okay. They said, no, you're not affected to the point of having PTSD. And I didn't think I had been, but a number
Because a lot
of people
being married beforehand, they come back a different person, and then they don't mesh well with the person that they were
You're
with
right.
before.
Um,
But you didn't change that much?
I didn't
before?
change that much. I wasn't a smoker, I wasn't a drinker, and I don't do either today. I was around a lot of marijuana smoking in Vietnam. The hamlets where we worked around, you would see just a cloud of marijuana smoke above them because they were so commonly used there.
Is that from the local people, or was that just the Army guys?
No, the local people. I'm talking.
Okay.
You see, I had an assignment after the first CAV. I didn't share that with you, with Military Advisory Command Vietnam, MACV, and I was given the assignment as a team leader, a MAT team leader, military advisory team, and there were a group of 7 of us that lived in our self-made hooch, ammo boxes filled with sand that become building blocks for the walls, and metal runway steel was the roof of our home, with about 4 or 5 layers of sandbags on top. And we had some men in our group that were pretty competent in construction, and they developed this whole thing into quite a home. And we lived in a compound with a Vietnamese counterpart. This was a Vietnamese captain. We called him he was a Dai Huy, and we related a lot with him and his family, and gave advice on improving their marksmanship, tactics in the field, and just all around way of living. And we were somewhat effective, but they were very interested in what we could provide for them, in supplies such as flagpoles and different kind of foods and supplies, and that was an interesting assignment. That was the assignment I was in when I left country, because I applied at the recommendation of my the company clerk. He and I were pretty close. He said, there's an Army regulation here that you can apply for an early release from active duty to go back to college to complete your coursework to begin teaching for the fall of that year. And I had become interested in becoming a teacher in the field of agriculture. And a friend of mine was in that field also. And he mailed me his handbook on agriculture education teaching. And I read it a great deal of the time, because after I left the field, I went back to the rear at the camp as the executive officer. And I had more time on my hands. I was managing food deliveries to the field and troops coming in and out. And I read that, became interested in it. So I applied for that enlisted man's regulation for early release from active duty. Didn't think much about it, even forgot I turned it in. I got orders one day. It says, you can be released from Vietnam in December of that same year. So you cut a couple months off of my tour in Vietnam, and when I went back, I was going to be released from the Army. And I thought, well, that's okay. So it's interesting. I submitted my, I mailed letters to the chairman of the Department of Agriculture Education at Ohio State, Dr. Bender, and I've kept all those letters to this day. And he cut a lot of coursework, the fact of standing in line, paying your fees, and they just rolled out the red carpet to me and told me what my first semester courses would be, and he was a great help to me. So when I came out of after Christmas in '69, I started taking courses back at Ohio State, and I was able to complete everything to teach in the fall of '69, and it worked out real well.
Where did you teach?
A high school that's not in operation right now. It was called Hannah Trace High School, now the South Gag High School. So I taught there for a couple of years, and then from there I resigned and went with Gallup City Schools as the teacher there. I was there for a couple of years, and then received an opportunity to work at Buckeye Hills Career Center. I became the agriculture supervisor, later on to become just kind of a generic supervisor. So I retired from there after 27 years, and it was a good place to a good career that I really enjoyed.
Now, after you got back, did you confront any anti-war protests?
Not in Gay County. Well, I really haven't personally run into, I don't know of any group of people or individuals that have been disrespectful to me. I'm the president of our local Gay County Vietnam Veterans organization. I have been since '92. And some of the men in our group have shared stories that I think in the San Francisco area, one of the fellows that got off the plane was denied the ability to eat in that restaurant, termed baby killers and, mercenary type soldiers. And but Gay County has been very respectful of Vietnam veterans. And we had our first parade as returning Vietnam veterans. I think that was in about 94, 92, my wife tells me, in 92. Dr. Clyde Evans, some doctors and people in the area were able to work out the details. They invited General Westmoreland to come and be the guest speaker. And Mary Ann Campbell was a part of that force of people that worked out that. So we had our first welcome home parade in '92. And of course, our group was given the award as the best marching unit. And a lot of our vets turned out for that. And they had put together fragments of their uniform, and some of them went out and bought additional clothing that would now fit them after they came back. And we had a great time. And I remember one of the veterans saying after the speech that General Westmoreland gave, he says, "Is that it? Is it all over with?" And I said, "Well, let me think about it." I don't know why they approached me. But I came up with Dr. Matura. Pamela Matura worked with me on this. And we came up with a list of Gay County Vietnam veterans. And she gave me that list, and we mailed out postcards to all those people wanting to express an interest to get back together and be unified into an organization called the Gay County Vietnam Veterans of America. And we had our organizational meeting out at O.O. McIntyre, and the rest is history. We've met nearly every month since '92, meeting now at the VFW Hall in Gallipolis. And it's been an interesting experience with the military, and I have no regrets of my assignments. I have no regrets of the people I've worked with, and it's been a positive situation for me.
Is there any skills that you picked up either in the military or in combat or whatever that you've been able to apply to your vocation or your life?
Probably people skills more than anything else, Mike. It's relating to so many different types of people. Developed an interest in teaching others. I went to a language school, picked up a few words, and most memorable one was, and I shared this with a young Vietnamese doctor at VA hospital in Chillicothe a few years ago. I said, "Co Dep Lam," and she just smiled, and that means in English it means young girl, very beautiful. And she hadn't heard any Vietnamese around her for quite a while.
That's a phrase you pick up in all the languages when you're a soldier. Right?
That's right. You use that one quite often.
What would you want to impart to young people today about your Vietnam experience?
I know it was an unpopular war and an unpopular result of many people still have questions why we gave up so many people in a foreign land. But we veterans were asked to serve. We served, we did our best, and we were obedient to what the government asked us to do. And many people benefited, but then many lost their lives. It's I'd say when your country calls you to serve, you need to serve. You'll never regret serving your country. And I know we many times outguess what is right and wrong, but the military is what you make of it. You can face it positively, and you'll have a better mental attitude when you're done with your military experience. Vietnam was a troublesome period of time in everybody's life, I think, and I have no interest in going back to Vietnam. When we boarded the plane to come home, when those wheels came up on that C-130, there was a big explosion of hurrahs among everyone. I mean, they went crazy. They were glad to get out of that country. And a very hot climate. That's the big adjustment I had to make to a new country. When we got off the plane, it wasn't just hot, it was boiling hot. Now, probably not as hot as what our troops are facing in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past year. It's very hot over there. But it was a very humid area because it rained a lot. I mean, during the monsoon season, we went through that. It just rained every day for a long period of time. But yeah, we were glad to get home and to be back with our families. And I know many of our vets have never really readjusted, because many of them saw a lot more bloody combat than I did. I saw some, but not to the extent of losing such close comrades. You know, as an officer, you don't develop that many real close personal relationships. And my friends, other fellow officers, there was a constant rotation, and you never got to know another officer that well. And so I didn't have that situation of losing close friends. But I wouldn't trade the experiences for anything else. It helped me become a little more structured than I think a lot of people are today. The military experience was, you know, you had to line up in basic training. You had to line your items up in your foot locker, and you learned structure, because if you didn't do that, you were facing the chewing out of those drill sergeants. And we went through that same experience as officers that our enlisted men went through. And you learn to care for your rifle and take care of your fellow man. You were a part of a team, and it was important to be a team member.
Anything else you want to share with us today?
I think probably I've said enough.
Thank you very much, Larry, for taking your time to be with
Okay.
us.